It starts with your own hard work, dedication, and that nobody can ever take away from you. The to whom much is given, much is expected. So how do we extend more of this opportunity to more people? Be eager to learn, and you'll be surprised how many people are willing to help.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to the Learning from Leaders series. It's a pleasure to have you here with us today. We have Peter, freshly back from Davos, I think, joining us. Good afternoon, Peter.
Good to see you again.
And we have as well with us our guest of honor, Vanessa Moungar, Group Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at LVMH. Good afternoon, Vanessa, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon, Luc. Thank you very much for having me.
Peter, floor is all yours.
Well, thank you. And I am indeed back from Davos, Switzerland, where we had the annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, an annual meeting where Vanessa has also been many times. She's a former employee of the World Economic Forum. And now I think I might as well meet her at the World Economic Forum myself, because she is going from strength to strength in her professional career. Vanessa, it's such a pleasure to have you back with us. I'm joining you from France. So in honor of you, I'm also in France, although I'm in the south, in Provence.
Oh,
and my first question, of course, to you and to all our guests that join us online is, how are you? And more importantly, where are you joining us from?
Thanks so much, Peter. Hello, everybody. I'm great. Thank you. I'm great today and very happy to be with you. Looking forward to this exchange. I'm joining you from Paris, France.
Yeah, I know. I have to say, Vanessa, I've been to the Avenue Montaigne once because I used to be a consultant at Bain & Company, and I was so proud we had our offices there, like the most chic neighborhood, I think, in Paris. For those who don't know it, just a stone's throw away from, of course, the Champs-Élysées. We'll talk a bit about that, but I want to start to ask you, it's been almost a year, I think, that you've been appointed Group Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at LVMH, the biggest luxury concern in the world. How has that year been for you, and what have been sort of the project that you've been working on with the greatest impact that you can already say I'm proudest to have worked on that?
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Well, as you mentioned, I joined the group last summer, and it's such a big group. It actually includes over 75, I think it's 76 maisons to date. So 76 different companies operating around the world in different industries. You have, of course, Louis Vuitton, Christian Dior, Fendi, so high-end luxury fashion. But you also have Sephora, or you have media publications like Le Parisien or Les Echos in France. So you have lots of different industries. It's a very interesting and diverse group. And so I think I've spent so much time first listening and understanding what was going on in the group already, because diversity and inclusion is not new, thank God, because there's been a lot going on across the group, in the different maisons, in the different regions, because as you know, these issues are also very much different depending on the cultural background that you're in. And the idea of creating this position for the group was to say, let's have somebody centrally here in Paris to coordinate our action on those questions and ensure we're all working and rowing in the same direction. So really my work has been to create that community and to federate alignment behind the vision that we have for the group, which is one of a group that is meritocratic and where everyone can succeed. I don't know if you can hear me, because I can hear the music. Yeah, where anyone can succeed. Where everyone can succeed regardless of their gender, their ethnicity, their race, their sexual orientation, their religious beliefs, or anything else. So really, that's the vision. And we want to make sure everyone's aligned, everyone's championing it from the top to the very bottom of the organization.
So it's a role that's, I suppose, very much focused on bringing diversity and inclusion in the company, which I'm sure with the heritage that many of these brands have, very typical Parisian, French, Western brands, that must be a big enough challenge as it is. I also noticed, though, that on the external side, externally facing in terms of advertising, that just this year, a couple of months ago, you announced your first ever Indian brand ambassador for Louis Vuitton. I hope I say the name correctly, Deepika Padukone. I think she's a famous actress in India. I always think, of course, and many people, I suppose, would think of the typical Hollywood stars being the representatives of the various LVMH brands. Is that also a focus to bring more diversity in let's say the faces of Louis Vuitton and Moet Hennessy, all these brands?
Well, to me, diversity is transversal to our business. So it's not just about recruitment or representation, although it very much is, because you need diverse team to do everything else in a diverse and inclusive way. But it spans across everything we do, from human resource management to the way we manage our supply chain, to the way we speak externally and influence society. Because when you think about it, our brands collectively have a large influence on the definition of the standards of beauty globally. So it's really a responsibility to ensure that our approach to diversity and inclusion is also felt in our external communications. Now, as I was saying before, we have lots of different maisons. So of course, the approach is different if you're looking at Sephora than if you're looking at Louis Vuitton. And I think there's been a general trend over the past few years, really towards more diverse representation across media in general, including in advertising for our brands, because we want to better reflect society, customers, and our talents as well. So I think it's not only the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do, because that will also ensure that everyone feels invited in the world of our brands and can not only shop in our stores, but also feel like applying to our companies, because we really want our doors to be open and we want the best to come and to stay and to thrive within the group.
Yeah, it's really an important mission, I think, and one that a lot of companies are now embracing increasingly, and I think rightfully so. You've, of course, all these countries that you operate in, and companies think about their societal role. I remember that LVMH, by the way, was one of the first companies to step in the COVID pandemic, if I recall correctly, producing, I think, a lot of gels and masks where it was possible. If you look at, that was in France, if you look at the US, a big focus, I think, the last few years has been on bringing diversity, not just in companies, but also in the companies that work with companies, in suppliers, in the advertising companies that are worked with, basically throughout the supply chain, you could say, and to work, for example, with what they call in the US minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses. Could you tell us a little bit what that looks like at LVMH, and to what, and you have any targets on that? When will your job be a success, let's say?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So as I was saying, it's really transversal to the business. So we have a whole pillar on the supply chain, the business itself, and look for opportunities for more diversity and inclusion and for more impact, basically, through the way we operate. And that's a very, very powerful lever, because when you look at all our maisons collectively, our purchasing, for example, is big. So some of our maisons have actually taken some very proactive steps, such as Sephora. In the US, Sephora signed a 15% pledge in terms of procurement. That's an affirmative procurement strategy, as we say, to buy 15% from minority-owned businesses. And this is something you see more and more. Depending on the regions, the approach will be different because the challenges are different. So the minorities in question may be different. But at the end of the day, it's that same spirit of what you were saying, is thinking about diversity beyond your recruitment handbook and thinking about how you can impact your ecosystem at large.
It's great. I mean, like, if you look around now in the company, I'm sure that you were also brought in part because people who were in, let's say the boardroom before you sort of felt like, not really too diverse yet. Do you feel that change? Does your presence alone, does it already generate, let's say, a positive change also for the people you work with?
I can't say that. No, that I don't know about that. You'd have to ask other people. But yes, there is definitely, and it's not new. Again, I think my arrival is to see how do we accelerate our impact. But the commitment of the group to more diversity and representation at all levels has really been there for at least 15 years, actually. We have the LVMH initiative that started 15 years ago, and that's where the group gave itself a target to have 50% women in key positions. And over 15 years, we went from 23% to 44% today. Is that enough? No, we want parity, of course, but it's not just in these key positions, it's also leading the companies. Today, we have 17 women CEOs. And binary gender equality, so
17
equality
across those 70 maisons that are part of LVMH.
Exactly, which is still not parity, right?
Not
but
parity,
it's better than
the industry.
Better than we were 15 years ago. So I think we're on that trajectory. where slowly more women are rising across the organizations. But diversity is not just about binary gender equality. And I think that's been dominating the conversation for the past decade or so, which is great because we had to have that conversation, but we need to open it more broadly now because we can't be having that same fight for each quote unquote minority. We should be having environments, organizations, be it in the public or private sector, that allow, that open their doors, as I was saying before, to everyone. Regardless of their particular characteristics, it should be about competence. And that's really what we're insisting on here. We're trying to remove discrimination from all of our processes. You know, you're training your recruiters, you're training the managers, you're sensitizing as much as you can, but there's only so much you can do on the training. And sometimes I say, it's hard to train somebody to be a good person, right? I mean, some of these things, it's the people we choose, it's the attitudes, it's the inclusive behaviors we have to strive for and we have to role model, because you're not going to be inclusive with one person and turn around and be a different person. It's about who you are, how much you respect everyone around you, regardless of who they are, where they come from, or what they look like.
You know, you've of course experienced both as a professional, I think also, for example, in your former role at the African Development Bank, and you know, as a person. I mean, like you are, I suppose you would tick a lot of the boxes of what would constitute either a minority or, of course, bringing gender equality. Like whether from the one perspective, namely the professional perspective, or from the personal perspective, what have you found some of the most powerful levers to increase diversity and inclusion?
Like in my own career,
For
or?
example, I mean, was it, and I hear people saying like, you know, for me, it was having a great coach, a great mentor, or for me, it was the fact that there were policies in place that allowed me to get ahead. You know, what is sort of, what are some of the things that people should be looking out for, I guess, when
Yeah.
they join a company and make sure that they're in an environment where they can thrive?
Well, oh, those are two different questions. So I'll start
Yeah,
with your
true.
last one
That's
and
true.
say, well,
So you get the choice.
I was just giving that advice to a young woman working in my team right now as an intern and who's looking for an apprenticeship. And she was telling me about a couple of things she was looking at. And I said, choose your leaders well. If you're looking at different companies and opportunities of places to work, look for who you would work for. Are these people you can look up to? Are these people that inspire you? Because then that will probably help you be even more engaged, committed, and impactful. It's very, very important. So, and sometimes, especially at the beginning of your career, you could be looking more at the labels, names of companies or titles. But really, I think it really makes a difference to see who you work for. And that links into the first question you were asking, Peter, because people made a huge difference in my life. Nobody will give you a free lunch. I mean, at least that wasn't my experience. So I never got anything like, oh, you're great, I like you, let me give you a job. No, does not work. So it starts with your own hard work, dedication, and that nobody can ever take away from you. So really working hard for me is always the number one recipe and the only one. And at least even when you fail, you've tried. So working hard is the first thing. But second is really surround yourself with as many people that can inspire and advise you as you can. It's always hard. People ask, how do you find a mentor? How do you recruit a mentor? You don't write to, at least in my experience, I never really wrote to someone and said, can you be my mentor? Because the problem is most of the time also the people you write to are very busy and everyone means well, but nobody can commit to giving X amount of time. I mean, as much as we try and we all sign up for, I'm always telling all my colleagues, any programs like that, sign me up. Although I know my time is already extended to the extreme. So people have a lot of goodwill. But I think the best way I found to give you practical tips was to start just asking for advice. Ask people for advice and you'll see who takes the time to do it or not. And when people start giving you advice, it's a very interesting psychological phenomenon. They suddenly start having a stake into your success. It's like they want you to succeed because they've advised you. So they may have something to do with it. You know what I mean? Without being too sarcastic, but I think that's how the human brains work. Anyways, ask for advice. Be humble always. Be eager to learn, and you'll be surprised how many people are willing to help. And in my own career, mentors really helped all along the way. And I'm still in touch actually with the manager of my first internship, the professor who advised that I look at the World Economic Forum. Unfortunately, he passed since, but we'd always remained in touch. Is those people that make a difference. And even today, when I had the offer to join LVMH, there's a few of these people that I called and said, hey, there's this opportunity. This is where I'm at right now. That's how I'm thinking. What do you think? And so that will always be helpful in your career. So people, and that's why building helpful, productive, respectful, positive relationships is extremely important, and they go a long way. Don't think that you leave one company and that you'll never see those people again. At least me, my network keeps growing as time goes, and it doesn't stay the same.
Yeah, it really does work, and it helps over time. I mean, I suppose you're the perfect example of your own theory, let's say. Or am I wrong? I mean, when you were growing up, when you were 5 or 10 years old, were you always meant to be in the boardroom in LVMH? Were you always running around the Avenue Montaigne, or what was
No,
your story?
no, I didn't grow up in this neighborhood. And actually, I was telling my 6 months old son, so I don't expect him to understand, although I'm thinking stuck somewhere. You're very lucky to be going around this park right now. I wasn't hanging out in the Champ de Mars close to the Eiffel Tower as a baby. But no, I grew up actually between Chad and France. My father is from Chad, Central Africa. My mom is French. And that's very important because first of all, that's my identity, my dual identity, although it's multiple. And but I grew up between these two, and I think that's why at a very early age I was very much aware of the imbalance that prevails in the world and the difference in terms of access to opportunity you have. I call that the lottery of birth. So depending on where you're born, you have access to something or you don't. And you don't need to go to Chad. The lottery of birth works even in one city, from one neighborhood to the other. You won't have access to the same opportunities. But so growing up and, spending my vacation in Chad with my cousins there, some of whom didn't go to school, and then coming back to France in September every year with my new little outfit. And even though my family was working class, but I was very aware that I had so much more privilege than the other half of my family. So I always felt like, okay, whatever I do, that will be, I think that's where it started. My purpose in life was to try and level the playing field. The to whom much is given, much is expected. So how do we extend more of this opportunity to more people? I'm not dreaming of a world where everyone has the same thing and is exactly equal. I think that would be idealism, but I wish we could have a world where anyone who's willing to work hard and to try can have a fair shot at life. And so that's been the red thread throughout my career. That's how I landed here. I never thought that I would be doing this job in this group today, but not the previous job either. And, it's very unfair when you're a student and people ask you what you're going to do. It's like, it's impossible to put a title or to imagine a path. What matters, though, is to find your purpose, regardless of what it is, without any judgments to yourself, because there's no better purpose than another. Just find your own. And that will be your own compass throughout your life to help you make decisions that will hopefully help you lead a fulfilled life.
And for you, that purpose was clear when, you shared that story of your cousins in Chad that didn't have the same opportunities as you. And so for you to equalize opportunities has been something that's very important. I do have to say, I was surprised to see, though, that your first job was in New York City, selling foods. I think nuts even. Is that right?
Yes.
How did you end up in New York City selling nuts?
So that's another interesting story. Basically, so I decided to do like you, study business school, undergrad, because I wanted to. So I had this idea, how do you level the playing field, change the world a little bit? I wasn't too convinced by the government side, honestly, particularly looking at the African continent. I was thinking, no, there's something that's not working there. Yet I was seeing business interests, right, into the continent and thinking, there has to be ways to create value through business, etc. And that's where I started reading the Michael Porter's Creating Shared Value. I don't know if that rings a bell to you, but if not, I recommend reading it.
Management guru Michael Porter, Harvard
And
Business School.
but for the
Yeah,
younger students, Peter, we're not that young anymore. I don't know. But this idea of responsible capitalism, of creating value that impacts society positively, etc. So I was really thinking about that. And I, also had the obsession of getting my master's from Harvard. That's another story, because my grandmother in Chad, who, by the way, could not read or write, she knew Harvard. It's the only university in the Western world that she knew, I think. And one day she said something like, if only one of my daughters could go to the same place as the sons of white men, something like that. And looking around the room, I knew if it had to be someone, was probably me. So it stayed in my mind. And when I had my undergrad degree, my dean told me, okay, what would you like to do? And I said, I need to get my master's from Harvard. To get your master's in the US, you need to work a little bit. So I will work first. I would love to go to New York because I was also a big fan of Sex and the City back then, which is probably also old news for you, but it was huge back then.
They're still making movies about it, so I think it's still a
Yeah,
reference
it's
to
true. It
the
was a
past.
movie, and they just did the new sequel, but it wasn't as great. But anyways, so because of that, I was like, if I can go to New York, if I can make it there, I'll make it anywhere. I had all these dreams in my mind. Let's just go. Help me find something. He put me in touch with a friend of his that was starting a company, Terrafina, selling nuts and dried fruits, organic products. They offered me an internship for 3 months. I went and I ended up staying for 8 years. The company grew a lot, but my first job was literally door to door sales from one supermarket to the other. I had my price list, I had my samples. That was the best training ever, you know,
But not yet
because
as glamorous as selling,
oh no, not glamorous at
luxury
all.
products.
And there were times, and back then there were no cell phones. So I would take the subway from one supermarket to the other, take the order, go to the payphone, call the office to give my order, and go to the next store. There's not, and I don't think it gets any less glamorous than that, and not in the best neighborhoods
Oh,
either.
no, I know. When you said that there were mice in your apartment.
The first apartment you get in New York, my first job. So whatever I made, that was enough to share a room in a shared apartment. So, and I moved 10 times in 8 years because at the beginning you sublet and then you come and you realize the person you're leasing from is not paying the rent to the owner, or there are mice
Wow.
in the apartment. I had all this until, you know, I was growing in my job. The company started doing better. And year after year, we grew. The team grew. I became director of sales. It was an amazing adventure. And my apartment was getting better as well.
And you
And
made it to Harvard.
there was this day when I came home and I felt like there was a doorman at my building, just like in Sex and the City. And when he greeted me, I said, now it's time to go back to school because, it's really nice, but that's not your purpose in life. That's just on the way, amazing
Right.
if you can live it, but it's not the end of the road. So you don't stay there. And I think in my career, every time I started feeling comfortable, that's when I knew it was time to move. So I studied for the GMAT. I applied to Harvard and I applied to the executive program so that I could keep working. So I was working during the day, and the first year I would commute by bus to Boston 3 times a week to get
That's
the evening
crazy.
classes and come back during the night and work the next day. That was crazy. Not necessarily recommended because I was very tired, but young. So,
And
and
you work for it, like it's
I
not
worked
like
for
it
it.
was just given to you on a silver plate.
No, no, it wasn't. But, like I said, when you work hard and you have a positive outlook on what's possible, nothing is impossible and people help you a lot. I think one thing also in hindsight is access to information. It's, for example, even going to Harvard. In hindsight, it sounds like it's this thing that is absolutely inaccessible. You need to apply, you need to know what tests to take, you need to know what letters to write, what recommendations to request. Of course, you need a good
Yeah.
file, but it's just this issue of access to information. So also always look for information, share the information you have. By the way, we're talking about mentorship, but mentor younger people because there's always something you're doing that could be helpful for somebody just a little behind you.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
think that's
digressing, but
absolutely
I'm
right.
sharing as
Because
much as I can.
after that, you're really set now. You've attained your first goal. I suppose that was a goal for in your 20s, and then you actually we actually met in Geneva. I think at the coffee machine at some point. But that was not a chance encounter. You had made it to the World Economic Forum to Geneva from New York. How did that happen?
Again, somebody. So when I got close to graduation, there were a few teachers that I loved and that had become my mentors. One of them was Calestus Juma, who was a professor at the Harvard Kennedy School. And I asked him for advice, so where should I go? How do we change the world? And so he said, well, I think you're a WEF person. WEF is the World Economic Forum. And I didn't really understand what he meant. And basically, the World Economic Forum, for those of you who may not know it, is, and Peter, you tell me if I'm not describing it right, because but it's an institute that for public-private collaboration or foundation now, I'm not sure, but really collaborating, enhancing collaboration between the public and the private sector for the better good of society. And honestly, when he mentioned that place, I only knew it from the global competitiveness report that you sometimes see in business school. But I looked at the website and I saw the mission, committed to improving the state of the world. I was like, That's
Perfect.
my mission. I love it. Really working somewhere where you can openly say that's our goal. That's amazing. And that's what attracted me at first. And lucky enough, I found this position that was responsible for Africa, West and Central Africa, so 22 countries. And back then I was thinking, I'd like to work on Africa more, etc., because that was part of me as well. That was that I hadn't touched yet enough. And so I took that job. And back then it was also an opportunity to do the Global Leadership Fellowship, which was another accelerated leadership program. That was an amazing experience. So I joined the forum. That's where I started traveling across Africa, meeting leaders from the public and private sector, learning so much. And that's what my professor had said. Go there, build your network, meet as many people as you can, and learn, 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 learn. And then you chart your own path. And so that's what I tried to do, Peter, for the 5 years that I was with you there.
Yeah, no, we lost you because you were one of the rising stars of the World Economic Forum. And I'm sure you could have made a fantastic career just staying at the forum, but you actually chose, to double down on that sort of purpose that you've by now really have developed and are working on. And you joined the African Development Bank. I think, by the way, are they based in Abidjan? Is that also where you were in Cote d'Ivoire?
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
That's so
So,
I moved from Geneva to Abidjan. Another interesting. Well, already
yeah.
New York to Paris wasn't the most straightforward. New York to Geneva, sorry, because you go from Manhattan and it's
Yes.
super. But then, yeah, no, Abidjan, amazing experience. So
And you became, because I have to say that, it's not just any job that you got there. You became one of the only, I suppose, women directors. Also, probably one of the, maybe the only director that was probably in her 30s or so. People are usually like in their 50s when they reach the top of such organizations.
yeah.
How do you do that? And then when you're there, working, I suppose, at that point on inclusion, on gender projects, how do you make sure that you can actually achieve results in the way that you did?
That's probably part of my career where I learned so much and a lot on myself. Because from a leadership perspective, it was very hard. As you said, I applied to a job that sounded bigger than me because I knew the African Development Bank was a traditionally African hierarchical and patriarchal institution. I hope they'll forgive me for saying that, but I'm not breaking any news there. And and so applying to a directorship there in your early 30s, so it
It's
was
a
really for me a
huge
bottle at
deal.
sea. And the lesson from that is throw the bottle at sea, because I would never have had that job if I didn't apply. So
For
for sure
sure.
it starts with applying, even though if you feel, and I remember, so in my mind I was at the WEF and I was thinking, okay, next I really want to focus more on Africa. I'm looking for a continental role. This institution, the African Development Bank that I knew, it's like the World Bank but Africa version, working on development projects across the continent, is the most respected and best established African institution working on development. So let me start looking at that. And I saw this opportunity to be a director for gender, these issues that were so close to my heart, also from my background. And it was a new department. So I just applied. And then I started also working my network, letting everybody know I had applied. Da, 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 da. I get into the interviews and my surprise, I get the job. When I got there, Peter, it was some of the hardest times of my professional life because really I wasn't expected. I was way too young, way too woman, although it was director for gender. So I don't think men especially fought for that one back then. Um, but really, so I heard everything. Of course, I was the girlfriend of the president of the bank. Of course, I had this job because I did this or that. I didn't apply. It was a passe droit, all sorts of stories. And I
Very
really took it
demeaning comments, it sounds.
very demeaning. But I kept telling myself, and I was even recording voice notes, thinking one day I'll write a book and I need to remember how I feel. And I
Yeah.
kept telling myself, it's not personal, it's what you represent. And everybody keeps talking about we want young people, we want women in leadership. But then when it's above you,
Yeah.
it's
Then
not
no.
as easy to support, And I kept thinking it's all of this. And it's on me to demonstrate why I'm here and why I may deserve to be here. And I also put myself in the shoes of staff there because, these are institutions where it's difficult to progress. There's not so many openings in leadership positions. So when you come from the outside, there's always this question of why you and not us. And if you're younger than us, even stronger. So I think that's human. Anyways, it took time, but we built our relationship. I built my team. I'm so proud of what we've done there, because after 5 years, it was a new team, but now there's about 50 people spanning all across the continent. They don't very often do surveys, but before I left, they did an employee survey because they had COVID and all this to know how people were doing. And my team, there's about 4,000 or 5,000 people, I think, working there. And my team at the end of the day was the happiest team on some levels. Not everything. Of course, they had things they wanted to complain about, salaries and anything you want. But the best dimensions were on, I feel like I can speak up. I feel like my team is friends or family. I feel safe. These kind of things that really matter to me as a manager and as a leader. And it's so funny because they invited me, I'm telling that anecdote because they invited me to speak to the other directors before leaving in a leadership seminar. So I was like, really?
Wow.
You want me to tell these guys how to manage their teams? Well, let me try. And it was amazing. And what I'm most proud of there is we actually institutionalized the gender approach in operations. We raised $400 million that we leveraged through our balance sheet to unlock $5 billion that are right now being lent to women entrepreneurs in Africa's 54 countries. So that was really like the most meaningful, I think, in my career to date in terms of impact on other people's lives.
I mean, absolutely huge impact, across the whole continent. Gathering funds for basically providing chances to women, probably at the lowest levels of entrepreneurship, really in villages and so on. I mean, when you do all that, and then all of a sudden, I suppose, Paris calls. I mean, Paris calls, and almost literally Paris calls. Like, you also joined at that time, a council of French President Emmanuel Macron on Africa. I mean, how does that go? Do you just get a call and it says, here's the Président de la République, or how does that happen?
So he didn't call himself.
Yeah.
But there was this call, it's true. And I had just arrived in Abidjan. I remember I was in my office and they called from the French presidency. And I was very surprised with this offer to join the French Presidential Council for Africa. And I was trying to understand what the thinking was behind that, because, the relations between France and Africa are very, they're what they are, right? And I was telling them, if you look at my trajectory, I'm not exactly sitting on your side of history. So tell me, why would you do that? And why me? And so they were saying, no, on the contrary, that was a promise that the president made during his campaign, that he wanted to have a group of people that were not from the establishment, that could represent civil society's voices. And since we want to build or improve France-Africa relations, people that can tell us without filter what they think we should be doing differently. So I thought that was quite a good opportunity. And as I was telling you, Peter, I was thinking, if I tell young women, if you don't have a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. If I tell them that, and I'm offered a seat at that table to maybe influence even just a little bit.
Like one of those 18th century Versailles chairs,
Beautiful. But I was like, of course, I cannot say no. It's a privilege to be asked. And actually, regardless of who the president is, because I didn't really know him back then, 2017. And so I accepted. And it's been a wonderful opportunity, because really an opportunity to speak truth to power and to live my values. My two conditions to be part of that group was for it to be volunteer, so I could not be accused of getting paid to advise on Africa. And secondly, to keep my freedom to stay or leave if I didn't feel comfortable. And I didn't leave, because really, I thought it was a really interesting platform to provide insights. And it doesn't mean that everything I said went through or anything like that, but at least provides a different point of view.
I mean, it's really incredible. We've got so much more questions for you. I can't keep track already on the chat, but I want to ask you a final personal question, Vanessa. And typically, I wouldn't ask this question because I think it's stereotypical, and it's not good to ask that question to women and not to men. But I'll put it this way. I just became a father a couple of months ago. And my wife and I, we are trying to figure out how we can keep, a balance between, our professional careers and our personal, commitments, of course, to our family. And I know you've also just become a mother around the same time. So maybe I can ask you, as a piece of advice to me, how do you do that? So I can do it too.
And I get this question very often, like, how do you manage work-life balance? So my short answer is I don't. I'm sorry, there's no secret. And if you find it, call me because we're all struggling with the same thing. And there's only 24 hours in a day. You do as much as you can. And I think we all do our best. Honestly, I'm trying to be the best mom, but also the best diversity and inclusion officer and the best daughter and the best sister and the best friend. And, there's so many hats that one wears. And I think the number one, the only piece of advice that I could give, and I'm trying to give to myself as well, is to be kind to yourself. We're so hard on ourselves, and be kind. Accept that you can't be perfect everywhere at the same time. So there are times in our lives where we might prioritize one area over another, and that is fine. Ask for support, because at least all the people that are in demanding positions, etc., nobody will tell you they're making it without support. It's impossible. And in that, choosing your partner is very important. We say that to women a lot, but now that gender roles are, evolving, it's not just for women, but choosing who you spend your life with and ensuring that this person supports your aspirations. That might mean support might go in one direction for a while and then the other direction. It doesn't matter, whatever that direction is, because that's also another important point. There's no secret road to success and happiness. It has to be your own, based on your own mental and heart compass. But choose your partner wisely. And yeah, I think that's what comes to mind. Do you have any tips for me, Peter, as a working dad?
Oh my God, our saving grace is, as both of our parents being parents and both of us also pursuing career, our saving grace actually has been our parents and my parents-in-law. And it's something that, of course, it's also a lottery, if you will.
Yeah.
Not of birth, but I suppose the reverse of it. And I think getting help is really underestimated, because the truth is that you can't do it all, neither as a mom or as a dad. If you want to also have a career, and so to have a network, as they say, I believe the saying goes, it takes a village, right? To,
Yes.
to raise a child. So I think that's been one of my great learn. Now, don't say it too loudly, or my parents-in-law are going to think that no, it's really been amazing. Um, Thank you so much, Vanessa, for this part. We've got so many people waiting to ask questions. Perhaps I want to suggest that we start with the students that are with us right now. I want to start with Maria Luisa, who is from Brazil, but is joining us, I think, from Barcelona. Her studies on campus, I believe. Maria Luisa, you're doing a BA in digital design and innovation. You want to tell
Yes,
us what your question is for Vanessa?
yes. Okay, so first of all, what you're saying, it's so beautiful. I feel like sometimes it gets tough, like finding out what you want. And I feel like when you're having a bad day, the smallest things can, hit you and you get discouraged. So I wanted to know if for you, it was something day by day, or if it was a specific achievement that you got.
Like, what keeps me
What keeps you
motivated?
going? Yes.
Hmm. That's a great question, because it's true. We operate on a daily basis. You get up in the morning and you go on to your routine. And yeah, I think what really drives me is the opportunity to make a difference. I really get moved and excited and committed, and I could work for hours when I know we're doing something that will really make a difference in someone's life. It could be one person, it could be a million people. But that's really my conviction, that if all of us could work on improving other people's lives, imagine what a nice world we would live in. So I also try and convince people to get on board. But I think it's that hope, that vision of a world that is slightly better. And yeah, and what I see in other people too, because you will find the world seems bad and sad and like everything's wrong. But when you start having that kind of narrative, talk about hope, talk about potential for impact, talk about change, you see the lights come into people's eyes, because everyone actually wants that. And so many people are looking for opportunities to engage in work, but not necessarily official work, but in movements that are life changing. So I think also looking into other people's eyes and looking for that little flame is what keeps me going too.
Okay. Wow, like this was so inspiring, I have to say.
Thank you, Maria
You
Luisa.
heard, I think, a second question, which I thought was quite intriguing, because Vanessa had gotten a great honor in a couple of years ago. You want to ask about that as well? I understood from you, Maria Luisa, that you know, you've been designated Woman of the Year. You know, and the question, I suppose, is, you know, how do you? I mean, I can't ask for myself. I suppose I can never become Woman of the Year, but many many people here want to find out, how does one become Woman of the Year? You know, what does it take?
So that, and you know, that's these kinds of accolades are such a surprise and so humbling. So when I found out about that and they sent me the magazine, I was like, oh, I just called my mom, you know, and I said, Mom, you know, because I was in Cote d'Ivoire back then. I said, buy one and keep it, you know, and that's it. It's for us, it's for our daughters, it's for our sons. There's nothing you do for that. I think if you're, I mean, I don't know, but I've never been looking for these things, accolades or whatever. Somehow your name, I guess, ends up in places when you're trying to do things. When you're trying to move things, then people see it and they're trying to recognize that. And I think it's super important to pass it along. So I've been blessed to be part of a few of those communities, that Woman of the Year or the Margarets or others. And it's always, how do we recommend more women? How do we put more women on the radar? Because I also feel like it's a lot about exposure. You know, you get nominated to one thing and then the second thing comes and then the third, and then it's always the same people on those rankings because
Right.
it's a virtuous cycle and good for them. But how about all those people that are doing amazing things but are just maybe not as connected to those
Mm.
networks? So that's also what I try and do, because exposure is everything, everything. Even in coming back to HR and recruitment, nobody gets nominated CEO if the big boss has never seen them in action. You
Yeah.
know, so make sure that you also get exposed. I'm coming back to sharing my tips, but
No, no,
yeah.
it's
So I
very
don't know how
good.
you do that, just, and don't care about doing that. I'm sure if you do great things, they'll be recognized.
Well, clearly it has worked for you, but you've also told us how much hard work was behind it. I want to turn now to another Maria, Maria in Armenia, in Yerevan, and she's doing a BBA in business. And Maria, you also had a question for Vanessa.
Dear Vanessa, thank you so much. It was really motivational speech for me. And so I'm really interested. As Chief Diversity and Inclusion Officer at LVMH, who had previously worked at the African Development Bank as Director for Gender, Women, and Society, in your opinion, how should organizations deal with sexist, racist, or homophobic comments in the workplace?
No, I think the short answer to that is zero tolerance policy, zero tolerance policy on everything, on comments, on behaviors. If you're clear about that, and it's not just the policy, it's the sanctions for the policy to be credible. So when it comes to LVMH, for example, we have a code of conduct that's very clear in terms of what's allowed, what's not allowed. It becomes difficult because, you know, some of these things can also be he said, she said. You don't always notice, you're not always there, you don't always have proof of these comments or of these behaviors. And this is where it's very difficult to be corrective. Corrective measures are always hard. That's why preventive measures are so important, you know, and I'm always bringing it back to culture, because yes, we can sanction and we need to make sure that somebody who's having an unacceptable behavior doesn't stay. Because one of my favorite quotes from Adam Grant actually is, your culture is defined by the worst behavior you tolerate. So do not tolerate bad behaviors, because everyone's watching and everyone thinks it's okay. So we cannot tolerate. But that's the, as I said, the corrective part. But I think it's very important to be preemptive, to be engaging a lot, to demonstrate, to role model positive, inclusive behaviors. If we are like that as leaders, if we recruit with that in mind, I'm convinced we will decrease the number of occurrences of these kinds of things. Unfortunately, even in our group, like there's 180,000 people. You know, you can never control and ensure like all of them will always say the right thing, but you can ensure you don't tolerate anything that crosses the line.
Yeah, it's I guess a constant challenge to do this. You know, maybe as a follow-up question, Natalie, who's online, she's asking, you know, are there any specific new initiatives that you've taken at LVMH in the past year, or that are in the pipeline now, and that work on these specific issues?
Yeah, there's a lot going on, although I cannot make like public official announcements here. What I can tell you is what's really interesting about this group is that So there's the group level and there's the maisons. And we do not, as a group, aim to control or standardize the actions of the maisons. So there's a lot that's going on in each of the maisons. And there is the policy that we set at group level. We have a great tool that is called the Inclusion Index. And that index actually aims to capture all the wonderful initiatives on diversity and inclusion that are happening across the group. So we are using that to also communicate and inspire across the group and ensure the best ones shine through. But an interesting thing we did during the month of March to celebrate the 15th anniversary of the ELS VMH initiative, so the Initiative for Gender Equity, is to open a group-wide consultation to all of our talents. So suddenly we consulted 180,000 people and asked, what should be the new objectives? What should be the new targets under ELS? Where is the glass ceiling? What are your ideas? And how do we co-create? And I think that's very new for an organization like ours, that big, to really be in that concept of co-crafting the culture that we want for tomorrow. And to me, that's extremely important because it again comes back to this concept of allyship, of inclusive culture. It's everyone's role in it. It's not just the policies, because the policies are there, but it's the behaviors that make you feel like they are real. So that was a great exercise. We got lots of ideas and submissions. We'll be unveiling the new strategy before the end of the year.
You'll
So
have to
maybe
join us to tell us, once it's official. There's also people asking, that are very inspired by your story, Vanessa, and they want to know, like, if I want to do this, if this is my purpose to work on, equal chances, to work on gender, to work on equality, how do I do it? How do I stand out among other applicants? This is a question I get from 3 different people: Eddie, Yasmin, and a poor. They either want to work in the same field or for the same company, like LVMH. What's your advice?
so. If it's about the same field, the good thing is that that's a practice that is growing. More and more positions are being created. Even within the group, I see it. More and more of our
DE and
maisons.
I think it's called, right?
Yeah, exactly. And they take different forms. In some areas, it could even be under CSR, like corporate social responsibility. Everybody has different definitions as to what it is, but those roles are really being created over and over again in many of the maisons. So I think there'll be more and more opportunities. The good thing is that I don't think there's a set path towards that. It's not the same thing as if you ask me, I want to be chief financial officer. Well, you'd better do XYZ to get there, because there's a
Good, because I
certain
thought
path.
we had to go and sell nuts in New York, yeah, if you wanted to become.
You don't have to. I don't think you have to. And that's the good news. There's so many different ways. I think the skills that are needed for this kind of job is to be comfortable with, to have a little bit of an extrovert personality, because you need to be able to influence without authority, to build coalitions of the willing, to work with people across the organization that don't have to work with you. So for example, the way I define D&I, I told you it's human resources, it's marketing, it's supply chain. That means I get to sit with all those teams and think with them about how we can do better in their spheres. They don't report to me, so they don't have to. I need to make them want to. So it's really that's influencing, but in a good way, that's bringing people together behind the vision and inspiring people to action without them having to. And I think that's a skill that you learn, across, some people would say, no, I don't think you're born with it. It's experience, but working in an organization, etc. So it's, yeah, I'd say that can help. At the same
Also,
time, it's a lot of personal purpose. I don't know anybody working on those issues that really doesn't give, that doesn't care personally. And the other thing is LVMH is hiring a lot. So I didn't mean to make a message for that, but if you
your
are
HR clients
interested
are going to be happy. So
to
many more
work,
new profiles coming in.
yes, if you want to work for the group, actually do look at the website. We have, I don't know how many, even internships, over 500 internships online,
Wow.
lots of young professionals positions, and we have offices all around the world. So there has to be opportunities that could fit your interests.
It's also interesting to see, of course, your career, not just the jobs that you've done, but also the places that you've worked. I think a lot of people, when they look at like the shiny, New York skyscrapers or the shiny offices, indeed in Avenue in the Avenue Montaigne where you work, they think, well, we got to go there straight away and we got to work our way up. But in fact, in your case, it's almost like the opposite is true. You went away from the limelight, you went away from the spotlights to, like, Abidjan, which, like, that's not a place that you usually would get noticed by the French president or by, the CEO of LVMH. Yet, because you did that, you got that experience, that diversity of experience, both geographically and in terms of sectors. And that made you, at the end of the day, the perfect candidate. But it's not something you can, sort of aim for in that way. It's like you go to Abidjan, I suppose, because you're at that point interested by the job that is offered to you there, not because afterwards you want to become Group Chief Diversity Officer of LVMH.
Exactly. And the only thing I had was that moral compass and that purpose that helped me make those decisions along the way. And, every decision matters because it probably sets you up for what will come after, but you don't know what will. And I think it's very important to be adaptable because, as you said, I was never attracted by this, actually, by the whole limelight thing. I'm not saying I don't like it. It's lovely to see these luxury brands and all the beauty world, etc. It's amazing. But just before that, I was working and I was sitting in refugee camps, in migration camps in the north of Niger with people that were about to cross the Mediterranean, trying to understand what made them flee, and it's all connected at the end of the day. And I think adaptability is also a key that you can develop early in your career while you're a student. Always say yes to, I don't know, study abroad, internships abroad, experiences that help you just test that adaptability because you don't even invent it. And maybe if I'd stayed always in Paris and not been around the world, done these different things, I wouldn't be here, but maybe I would be somewhere else. So all decisions are fine if they respond to your own sense of purpose.
That's really great. I want to bring up the last student that has joined us on camera, Daniela. Daniela, who is from Namibia and in Namibia for summer break, I suppose, Daniela. And you also have a question for Vanessa.
Hi, Vanessa. It's so lovely to meet you and to learn from you. I wanted to ask you about you basically answered it because everyone has asked you from different perspectives and ways, but I wanted to ask you about how you persevered and maintained your role as a female leader while you can feel a lot of resistance from men leading, especially in African societies. But I already wrote down what you said. I love this especially. You said, bring a folding seat to the table. This I will never forget. So I would rather like to ask you about, I'd like to first congratulate you on your inspiring career, being elected Woman of the Year by Madame Figaro in 2020, and for being named one of the 100 most influential Africans in 2017 by New Africa magazine. So what would you like to achieve next?
Okay. So I'll just say something about your first question, because, even though I responded, this issue of the hardship when you come into a leadership position and people challenging you, I think, yes, it was difficult with men, but with women as well. And that's another thing to keep in mind as women and as human beings in general. Let's support each other all the time, not just when it sounds good, when it's a nice tagline or whatever. Support each other all the time. In a room, when somebody's being put down, bring them up. Be the one. Stand up for the people that are being mistreated. You can, it goes such a long way. And again, if we all did that, we would live in a very different world. And I think that's also something that I learned there is how do I really want to treat other people? So make sure that you're treating others the way you would want to be treated, and not just think about what you're going through. What's next? Honestly, when you said that, what I was thinking, because it's also so new to me, is I really hope I can be a great mom. And that comes back to the question of Peter, is what is a fulfilled life? And it could look like it's your career. And of course, I'm going to continue and I want to have impact at LVMH. I don't know what will come after that. It's my hard work every day. And I almost have confidence in that, because hard work is in my, if I decide to work hard, I will work hard, right? As long as I got health. So that's, I feel like I can control, and I'll continue to do, and I'm sure impact will come from that. On the other hand, being a mom is my new experience, where I'm learning every day. So this is where today I have more of the imposter syndrome. When I come back home and it's too late and somebody else has already given him the bath, I'm so annoyed. And so I'm giving you those small mini details, but just to show that nobody is just one dimension. We're all 360 degrees. And thinking that, I think thankfully, we don't think this way anymore, but there's no real separation between your personal and your professional life. And trying to be fulfilled in both is probably the best recipe to try and lead a successful and happy life. So don't neglect one side for the other.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, Vanessa, for all of us. I also feel your advice applies to me. And maybe building on that, there was a question. I don't know if it was from Louisa in the video chat or in the regular chat, but who asked that question exactly? I think to close it out, it's a good one, which is, what is at the end of the day your best piece of advice that you could share with people that are starting their journey today? Or indeed the best piece of advice that you've gotten looking back to the first, let's say 15, 20 years that you've gotten advice from people, I suppose?
Well, that's hard, huh? But I think what really resonates is be yourself. Everybody else is taken anyway, like that one. And in any case, it's like the best leader in you is you. So trying to be somebody else does not work. Even if you look at some leadership traits that could inspire you, you look at someone, oh, they seem great, they do this really well, might not work for you. So I think the most important quest is to know yourself first, know your strength, use your strengths. Some people say work on your weaknesses. It's you should always try and improve on everything. Depends on what weaknesses, but work on your strengths really, because that's what will probably get you places. But really be yourself, because that's what's, looking in hindsight in my career, the toughest moments when I joined the African Development Bank and then I wasn't necessarily welcome. Everybody gave me lots of pieces of advice. Stop smiling so much. Here it's the stick that works. People need to fear you. Da 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 da. And I was like, if I do that, I'm going to be miserable for years. I don't want to be that person. And you know what? I'm going to be myself and lead with smiles, and my team will feel good, and we'll have lunch together, and we'll do this and we'll do that. And at the end of the day, that worked. So I never regretted being myself. So be yourself. I think that works for everything at work, in relationships. The best way is to be authentic.
I think that resonates so much because, at the end of the day, either that leads you to success, which is probably the highest likely outcome, because as you say, you can only be yourself and everyone else is taken. And on the other hand, if it doesn't work out, then at least you get up in the morning, you look in the mirror and you say, I have always been true to myself. And that's worth a lot, even if it doesn't always lead to the best outcomes on the job, I suppose.
Absolutely.
Well, I
And
cannot
be
imagine.
kind to yourself. We put so much pressure on ourselves. So be kind to yourselves. You're amazing. You're doing great. You're studying. It's probably one of the best times of your life. I loved being a student. I don't know if everybody does, but I did. So enjoy this time, take the time to also enjoy life, and this generation, I think, is probably better than ours at trying to get more of that balance. So do it and challenge the status quo.
Well, Vanessa, I think that you've convinced at least 100 people here today to do that. So I want to thank you again. You said be yourself and be kind to yourself. I think that's great pieces of advice. We took so much from our hour spent together. And I want to thank you for taking that time. We hope, of course, to see you again. We want to hear all about your initiatives and everything that's coming next. But for now, allow me to thank you on behalf of everyone, and also perhaps to look for a final word of thanks from his side.
Thank you very much, Peter. Thank you very much, Vanessa. I couldn't have thought of a better session to close the Learning from Leaders series of this year. You have really set the tone for the future for the future sessions. You're acting as a role model for all of our students already, and I think I've seen in the comments a lot of inspiration that have come through this session. And I cannot thank you enough. And yes, what we have to remember from this session is be yourself, because by being yourself, you can really make this difference. So thank you. And if you're around any of our campus, we'll love to have a live session. You will always be welcomed on any of our campuses.
Thank you so
This is it
much.
for us. This is it for us from Learning from Leaders. I think it has been a great year where we had a lot of learnings from CEOs, from serial entrepreneurs. Every session has been an amazing learning. The closing has been perfect with Vanessa. So we are already working for next year with Peter, and some great things will be coming up. Thank you, Vanessa. Thank you, Peter, and enjoy your summer.